and welcome to I Could Murder a Podcast. We're back once again with a brand new episode. I'm joined by the cheeky chappy, Ben Carter.
Cheeky chappy indeed. How are you doing, boys? It's great to be back with another episode. Sorry.
Cheeky chappy.
Cheeky chappy indeed. It's great to be back with another episode, boys. But this one in particular, absolutely harrowing. How are we, producer Dan?
Very well, thank you. Spring is springing. I don't think it's sprung yet, but it's springing, and it makes me feel sprung.
Well, you go.
Just like my hair, actually. We got caught in the rain. I look like a twat today, don't I? Fucking hell.
You look like a kid that ate a lot of chocolate cake, had a good glow up.
Fuck!
Good glow up.
That was in the back of my head as well. I do, don't I? That's really annoying.
A good glow up there. So
Thank
there's
you.
a compliment in there.
Okay.
Good glue pup. Augustus.
That's a different.
Yeah, it's good actually.
Different Roald Dahl
Oh.
book. Chocolate cake, Bruce Bogtrusser, Matilda. But it doesn't matter. We're in a Roald Dahl mood. It's fine. But spring is starting to come. It's starting to get stormy as well. But we're getting through it. And yes, a big welcome to. We had a lot of new subscribers, so thank you so much. We said last episode, if you guys haven't subscribed, please do. Oh. And you guys came in your trove, so thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed, why not give us a little follow or subscribe? And it's much appreciated. I said subscribe so many times now.
Yes, indeed. Well, we arrive at a case. This is actually one of two cases, Tom and Dan, that we said back in the day we probably would look to avoid covering alongside the James Bolger case. And the reason behind that is that our parents, at the time of both of those cases, particularly found them to be particularly emotionally challenging cases to cover. But it's also a case that we very much want to shine a light on and tell the story of, because it's important to remember what happened. But this one, wow. School shootings and mass shootings are hard to research, hard to deliver, and hard to kind of fathom in your minds in terms of them happening at all, but happening so close to home. And yeah, it's particularly challenging. And I think it's very clear as to see why so many laws were changed as a result of this week's particular case.
See, at the time this happened, I would have been 6 myself. My mum felt a bit close to home. In fact, the ages and, imagining what, if this was happening at the school when I was attending, or my brother was attending as well. I think that's why it kind of definitely hit a nerve and struck a chord with her. But it's important to cover these cases and shed some light on it. I think sometimes we've felt morally along the way, is it right to maybe talk about certain cases? Is it insensitive? But earlier this month, we actually got a message, a DM from someone who actually was a survivor of the Virginia Tech shooting, and they said they watched the content and they found it actually really well researched. They found it kind of comforting in the sense of watching it, because even though it was lighthearted, they actually found that made it more palatable. And they thanked us for talking about it and said it was important to talk about it. And I think that was such a amazing message to receive. I think it's easy for us to do the podcast and maybe not imagine who's listening to it, and of course someone who survived the actual incident and been there to give it such a glowing review and say how important it was. It's really it's made me feel a lot more at ease kind of covering these cases and make me feel like what we're doing is right. And I think it is important to talk about.
So this week it is the Dunblane Massacre, also referred to as the case of Thomas Hamilton, the deadliest mass shooting in British history, the Dunblane primary school shooting, and the case of Mr. Creepy.
I mean, we're not talking about Ben. It is the Dunblane Massacre this week. Ben, what was the clue for this week, though?
Last week, if you're watching chronologically, it was the peaceful Irishman who avoids responsibility at all costs. Don't blame. Dunblane. Didn't know if we were going to talk about that.
I don't know if we'll talk about any more about it, but that was the clue, and congratulations if you did get it, or maybe ask yourself some questions if you did get it. I'm not sure where I sit with that. And as we always do, we'll go through a bit of the history of the perpetrator and see if there's any red flags along the way. In this case, there definitely are, but we'll talk about that and discuss, obviously, the tragic events that happened that day.
The small Scottish town of Dunblane sits just over 30 miles northeast of Glasgow and a little over 40 miles away from the country's capital of Edinburgh. Though it had a lovely, close-knit community, it was a place where nothing happened. People went about their business without a care in the world, families were raised, and lives were lived to their fullest. It was a place of serenity. A place for those dreaming of a quiet and peaceful life, away from the city. It was a kind of place where, if a child fell in the street, several people would rush to pick them up. Or, if someone had got good news, it would very quickly be shared and celebrated all over the town. All of that changed forever on the morning of March 13th, 1996, as Dunblane was heinously tainted by the actions of one lone, deranged individual. On that cold, icy morning, as some snow partially covered the roads and fields, hundreds of parents dropped their young children off at the local primary school as if it was a day like any other. Not long after lessons had begun, 43-year-old Thomas Hamilton, an individual with an extensive and very public history of disturbing behaviours related to young boys and firearms, made his way into the school via the gymnasium. Over the next 4 minutes, a total of 105 shots were fired indiscriminately towards completely innocent 5- and 6-year-old children, as well as their teachers rushing to protect them. The bullets were sprayed rapidly without a care in the world, completely fueled by a deep hate and alienation that had been brewing for decades. After the mayhem had finished, a 106th bullet was shot, and the shooter fell to the ground. 16 infant children went to school that morning, together with their teacher, and never made it home. 17 families were left eternally broken. Dozens more were injured, whilst many others were left with a deep trauma that would last a lifetime. The town, the country, and the entire United Kingdom was changed forever.
How did the shooter, who had a history of exceedingly concerning behaviours and mental health issues, legally gain access to multiple firearms? Why were the young pupils of Dunblane Primary School chosen as his key targets? When did concerns about his behaviour, particularly those regarding his interactions with young boys, first start to emerge? And what lasting impact did the Dunblane Massacre have on gun control in the United Kingdom that remains present to date almost 30 years later?
We are going to begin with the background of the Dunblane shooter before moving on to a particularly chilling timeline of events. Thomas Watt Hamilton was born at Thomas Watt Jr. on the 10th of May 1952 in the city of Glasgow, Scotland. He was the only child born to Thomas Watt Sr., who worked as a bus driver in the city centre, and Agnes Graham Hamilton, who worked as a chambermaid at a local hotel. Chambermaid, is that just, it's just someone who cleans up the rooms, eh?
I think so.
Yeah.
A woman who cleans bedrooms and bathrooms in a hotel.
Brilliant. The pair were already divorced by the time that Thomas was born, and Thomas Sr. would go on to abandon the family for another woman, who was actually a young bus conductress named Margaret McGill. Maybe got a McThrill when he saw her. By the time that Thomas Jr. was just 18 months old. So it's safe to say that Thomas Jr. never truly knew or held any kind of relationship with his biological father. Shortly after Thomas turned 2 years old, his mother's adoptive parents, James and Catherine, who are believed to have actually been her biological uncle and aunt, legally adopted him and changed his name from Thomas Watt Jr. to Thomas Watt Hamilton. They did this to prevent any kind of scandal and conceal the fact that his father had abandoned him and his mother. From here, they raised him as one of their own, taking him to live with them alongside his mother, Agnes.
Yeah, so just as we saw in the case of Ted Bundy, Thomas was raised believing that his biological mother was actually his older sister and that his grandparents or his great uncle and aunt were actually his parents. And he would not go on to learn the truth of the matter for another 20 years.
A bit like Cat Slater in EastEnders with daughter Zoe in the Albert Square. You're not my mother. Yes, I am. I can imagine that kind of altercation happening in the streets of Glasgow, perhaps.
Perhaps, yeah, absolutely. And it happens more often, it's happened more often than you might expect it to, certainly in cases we've covered. And we've seen in many of those cases where any kind of fractured or slightly ambiguous relationship with the biological mother can have a huge and lasting impact on an individual. We saw it last week, David Berkowitz. That was a big factor. And many other episodes, Ed Gein, Harold Shipman, Charles Manson, Fred West, Ed Kemper. And this was very much the case with Thomas Hamilton. So during the early years of Thomas's childhood, the Hamilton family abruptly relocated from Glasgow to is it Glasgow or Glasgow, by the way? Because we have a lot of Scottish friends and listeners and viewers. And I don't want to piss anyone off.
I think it depends where you are in the UK, really. I'd say Glasgow.
Yeah, Tom said like Glasgow, though. It sounded quite nice.
But that's right, too, as well. Just depends.
Yeah, I think it's probably like glass and glass, isn't it? Yeah, glass and Bath and Bath. It's a similar kind of... I don't think
a locality thing.
Yeah, I don't think people can drag you over the coals for...
might. Someone might.
They'll try.
I'm going to go with Glasgow for now. We'll see how we do.
Don't change it.
But basically, the family very quickly relocated to a small maisonette on the, quote, poor but friendly public housing estate of Kent Road in the city of Stirling, Scotland. It's been speculated that this move was due to locals basically discovering that Agnes was a single mother, which was, as Tom said, considered scandalous at the time. Here, neighbours recalled a young Thomas behaving strangely and standing out, even from an early age. He would allegedly keep his hands in his pockets at all times, often wear large, oversized anoraks, and struggle to speak or make eye contact with any of his neighbours, some of whom had nicknamed him Spock. To the outside world, meanwhile, the Hamiltons were an ordinary family of 4 with a young son and a 20-year age gap to their older daughter. Little did they or Thomas know that this was actually his mother. Thomas attended the local Riverside Secondary School in Stirling, where he was described as somewhat of a loner and allegedly teased for looking like a nerd and doodling weird drawings on notebooks. Thinking straight away, is it Superbad with the cocks?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what he was doodling. Despite this, he seemed to perform well enough in classes, displaying an above-average intelligence and taking up an interest in chess. He tended to keep himself to himself, had very few friends, and often struggled with social awkwardness. To most of his schoolmates, he seemed to be a fairly forgettable individual, with one former classmate recalling him as a, quote, outsider who seemed to delight in creating fear. Like any good villain. Alongside his school life, Thomas joined the Boys Brigade, which was a popular Christian youth organisation known for combining drill and activities with Christian values. And it's in this particular youth organisation where he first formed an interest in the military and later firearms. He subsequently joined a local rifle club in his teenage years. So at this point, nothing too alarming. Little bit of bullying, it sounds like. People bullying him.
A penchant for liking creating fear stands out to me.
Yeah, maybe I breezed past that.
And interest in guns, which doesn't mean the worst. We know you can just have an interest in guns. Doesn't mean you're going to go on to do certain things. But maybe not anything that's like an immediate 100% red flag.
Oh boy, but they are coming.
Thomas left school at the age of 15 with a limited number of qualifications and briefly attended Falkirk Technical College, where he took a course on electrical engineering. He dropped out for unknown reasons after having barely made a start to the course. He then took on an apprenticeship as a draftsman at an architect's college in Stirling, but once again dropped out after a few months. Again, the reasons behind this are not completely clear.
Shocking dropping out of electrical engineering.
It works, that works.
Architect.
Just give him time. No.
Planning permission.
In 1972...
Thought they'd given the blueprints for a bright future, but...
Yeah.
Any more?
That's it. For now.
In 1972, aged 19, Thomas made the decision to open a small DIY hobbycraft shop in his village. It was called Woodcraft. Initially, it had some success, with Thomas later adding a fitting kitchen service to his offerings. Here, he was just... Sorry, please.
Sorry.
Please, let me know what you think about that.
Just, wow, it's expanding.
It is.
I wonder if he subcontracted it.
Perhaps.
To other tradespeople.
Here, he was described as a smart, polite young man who always wore a suit and tie underneath his oversized anorak whilst in his shop. That must get sweaty.
Scotland, though, nice and cool.
Good point. He also wore oversized Jeffrey Dahmer-esque glasses. Oh.
Sorry.
He would run this role for almost 2 decades before, according to him, a whispering campaign of his strange and concerning behaviours would eventually cause him to close his shop. One of his regular customers, a local painter and decorator, recalled the following about Thomas as a young adult. You just knew there was just something about him. He didn't act normal around women and children, and he could never look you in the eye. You just knew, and you could tell he was a pervert. Brutal.
The following year, shortly before his 21st birthday, Thomas joined his local Boy Scouts group named the Venture Scouts. The Venture Scouts. Though most of the Scouts were aged between 9 and 14, Thomas felt for the first time in his life that he was finally fitting in. He quickly became a volunteer assistant and started spending almost all of his free time with the troop. He would participate in activities and offer to teach the young boys various different skills, including basic woodwork and knot tying. Not tying is such. I guess if you're out in the wilderness, can be useful. But
And on boats.
yeah, and on boats certainly.
Sure.
Not is it a dying art? You think, Dan? Not tying.
I wouldn't say that. I don't think it's dying.
Ben
it's
said
just a
it
bit
before we
niche,
started recording.
perhaps.
That's why I bring it up.
I did what, sorry?
You were saying before we started the episode, you're like, not tying is dying art. And I was like, that's a weird thing to say. Last Dan. And he disagrees with you. He was quickly worked anyway. So Thomas quickly worked his way up the ranks, eventually being made the assistant leader of the 4th and 6th Sterling Troop of the Scout Association. Though the entire time, numerous dark and sinister intentions were lurking beneath the surface. Thomas wanted to combine his two favourite obsessions: firearms and young boys. Towards the back end of 1973, Thomas was seconded as a scout leader to the 24th Stirlingshire Troop. In this position, it gave him the opportunity to lead 14 different boys' sports clubs and scout outings, spending extended and close contact with the boys, further away from their families. He would post flyers around the neighbourhood inviting boys to play football, go camping, learn gymnastics and other games/skills. In just under a year into him leading the Boy Scouts group, several shocking and highly disturbing allegations started to come forward regarding Thomas and his behaviour around young boys, with several complaints being made to local police. The concerns gradually got darker over time, with more boys eventually working up the courage to talk about their experiences with the 22-year-old. Eventually, a total of 12 separate complaints or accusations were reported to 4 different Scottish police forces: Central Scotland, Fife, Dunfermline and Linlithgow by parents of the boys. Firstly, it was expressed that Thomas was teaching the young boys how to handle weapons, including rifles and handguns, and even allowing the youngsters to shoot various weapons at moving targets whilst away on scout hiking trips. As well as this, it was reported that Thomas was encouraging the young boys to take their tops and sometimes their trousers off whilst on the hikes, where he would then proceed to photograph the boys in semi-nude states and place the various photos on his own bedroom walls. One neighbour of the Hamilton family, Grace Ogilvie, who was a parent of 2 of the boys in Thomas's scout group, made the following comments about Thomas.
He asked me in to have a look at photographs and a video of my boys running around in nothing but skimpy black shorts. He had photos of others in various states of undress pinned up on his walls. There was something odd about it all. I felt like having a shower afterwards. I got out as fast as I could and never went in again.
There's going to be a lot more of this type of concerning behaviour as we move through to the timeline. One of the things that I heard was that he would, in convincing the boys to undress, he would basically state whoever worked up the most sweat or whoever had the best torso would become essentially the captain of the various sports teams that he was running. And so some of the children, because of their ages, they didn't necessarily know how wrong and how inappropriate that was of him. And he would basically force them to kind of compete against each other. Obviously then some of them have gone on to tell their parents.
The sweatiest.
Yeah, it's very strange. Needless to say, the complaints grew and the complaints continued to get far worse. At least 8 other sets of parents came forward to claim that Thomas had forced their children to, quote, sleep in close proximity to him in his camper van. And this would apparently happen when out on 2 separate overnight camping trips and hill walking expeditions in the picturesque town of Avermore in the Scottish Highlands, which, by the way, Avermore looks incredible. It looks like it should be in Canada. Most of the Scottish Highlands is incredible, to be fair.
Ooh, baby.
Oh, I have more, darling. Yeah, I didn't have any more. I didn't have any more biscuits, so you left right out the back door.
But obviously in the context of what he was doing, absolutely hideous. So the reason why this happened, on the first occasion, he told parents that the hostel he claimed that he had booked for the boys had turned them away in the pouring rain at short notice, and so they all jumped in the back of his camper van. Whilst on the second occasion, he expressed that the boys had, quote, gotten freezing cold whilst digging snow holes, and so they briefly huddled in the back of his van, which resulted in them spending the night in the van rather than finishing setting up camp. So every complaint, this is a thing, and these complaints will mount up and get so much worse, he has an excuse or an argument against all of them. So he's trying to look like, oh, the hostel was fully booked, or they turned me away and I put a roof over their heads. They're freezing cold, I got them out of the cold. It's disgusting. A spokesperson for the Scout movement would later make the following remarks about these particular complaints.
During the first weekend, Mr. Hamilton claimed that he'd booked a hostel for the boys in Avermore, but that was untrue. He had slept in the back of his van with 8 boys. This only came to light when the van froze up and the children had an uncomfortable night and became unwell. On the second occasion, they were digging snow holes and got extremely wet and cold.
Never heard of a snow hole.
Me neither.
No, I thought Dan would probably know, because I don't. I'm assuming it's like, is that for to then build your camp in the hole, or is it for toilet?
Is that for toilet?
Is that for toilet?
That times that Ben's walked past someone digging a snow hole and just dropped his trousers.
Yeah.
It is a shelter dug in the deep, usually drifted snow, also called snow cave.
Oh, it's my first guess, not my...
Just don't go pooing in
Shelter.
people's snow holes, please, Ben. Not what you like.
Like
Always doing
a,
so many poos. Constant.
like a wild animal.
Yeah. Brown and red snow after Mr. Carter's been.
The final concern that was raised suggested that Thomas had convinced several young boys within his troop to engage in perverted activities, both with him and with one another. And this particular complaint alleged that Thomas had given the boys, quote, money, privileges and treats in order to stay quiet to their parents, siblings and friends about what happened at his camps. With each accusation, Thomas was somehow able to deflect police interest and ask them to provide any evidence that would stand up in court. He's very argumentative to these, and this will be to the end of his life, adamant that nothing strange was going on and that he was teaching the boys and providing them with the best possible care, and it just gets fucking worse and worse.
Regardless of this, in May of 1974, a 22-year-old Thomas Hamilton was asked to immediately step down from his position in the Scouts as he was deemed not suitable to be a troop leader. And he also had his Scout warrant withdrawn due to the Scouts County Commissioner stating that he was suspicious of his moral intentions towards boys. This incident, together with some family news that would be broken to him in the next few months, heavily contributed to a hatred he developed for society, a hatred that would continue to grow and fester for the rest of his life. Shortly after being removed from his role in the Scouts, and after being totally blacklisted from the Scouts as a result of applying to join 2 other localities, Thomas was sat down and informed of the truth about his biological mother from his grandparents, of whom he believed to be his actual parents. He had spent more than 2 decades believing that his mother was his older sister, and this news was said to have had a significant psychological impact on him once again for the rest of his life.
Over the next few years, while still trying to find a way back into the Scouts, Thomas applied for and was granted his first weapons license. He became a regular at his local rifle club and began to accumulate numerous different weapons and ammunition, including 2 Browning high-power pistols and 2 Smith & Wesson Model 19 revolvers, rifles and allegedly a shotgun. He would participate at local gun ranges and different shooting competitions where regulars described him as peculiar and reckless, which is not what you want with a gun, I think.
No.
Peculiar and reckless. He often broke the gun range's rules, often rapidly firing more than the 12 bullets per minute rule. Interesting rule. Yeah, every 5 seconds you can shoot.
Yeah, makes sense.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
And often saturating single targets with bullets rather than alternating fire at 3 designated targets.
So you're either showing off or you're angry, or both. Just peppering one target instead of you've got 3, there's that number, 3 targets in front of you, which is supposed to
Target
alternate
fixation.
between. Yeah.
Have you boys ever been clay pigeon shooting?
No.
I fired a couple of bullets in Vietnam on a gun range.
Ben did that thing, he paid 100 quid to shoot a bazooka at a cow.
No.
I did not. Why would you even believe that for a second? No. I was on a backpacking trip around the world. We were in Vietnam. My friend paid hundreds of pounds to shoot AK-47s and all other things at static targets. I got one of his goes with a machine gun and just fired 1 bullet. But I was struggling. I was running out of money towards that part of the trip. I did not fire a bazooka at a cow.
A machine gun, you fired 1 bullet.
I've got a video of it somewhere.
Just
I held
1
it
bullet?
reasonably well. Yeah, it was annoying because I was like, oh, that was not satisfying.
As in they didn't load you didn't have a full magazine to shoot?
He was basically like, he paid all the money. I just sort of was stood there watching and then popped the headphones on me and let me fire 1 bullet and then I gave it back and walked out.
The recoil was nuts.
It was nuts, yeah. Because he did the Rambo gun, whatever, all sorts. It's a good trip though.
Poor cow. In the late 80s, when Thomas was 36, he was fired as a leader of a boys' brigade youth club he had somehow gained access to after incidents involving nakedness and fondling were reported at a summer camp in Loch Lomond. These complaints were spearheaded by a woman named Doreen Hagger, whose 11-year-old son claimed that Thomas had forced him and other Boy Scouts to rub suntan oil all over his body and genitals during a 2-week summer camp. Her son also claimed that Thomas threw multiple boys out of a boat whilst out deep on the lake. When Doreen confronted Thomas about this, he allegedly denied the claims and threatened her at gunpoint. Days after this, Doreen and a friend pelted Thomas with 2 buckets filled with a concoction of liquid manure, suntan oil, eggs and flour. Doreen then shouted, "I'm sorry I couldn't get a wee boy to rub it in." He retaliated by threatening her with a shotgun. Kind of like, you remember Get Your Own Back?
Yes. Getting gunked.
Yeah.
She gunked him. They gunked him.
With manure, suntan oil, eggs and flour. Yeah.
I like the quip as well.
So they couldn't get a wee boy to rub it in.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe like, because they used to get teachers on Get Your Own Back, didn't they?
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
So they put them on the top of that thing and it slide down and go...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit darker if you're getting the local paedophile to sit on there. No police action was ever taken there. Thomas was never filed a complaint about this, and he retained his gun license despite the reports. He's threatened the woman now twice with a gun. He's been reckless at the gun range. You could say, the reckless nature at the gun range, to be honest, maybe I'm wrong here. Overshooting a target and shooting too many. That doesn't fit. It's not like he's threatening people or being weird to people and using his gun in a threatening way to other people. So maybe that's not looked.
I would say it lacks discipline, though.
Yeah.
Which is a bad sign.
Sure.
The other thing is, if you've got nothing to hide and you've done nothing wrong and someone throws a bucket of shit over you or 2 buckets of shit over you, I would go to the police about that.
Yeah,
he's not reported it or not. He's like, the way I'm seeing that is he's like, all right, you've got me.
Yeah.
But then he's held a gun up, so maybe...
Like flour I get, but the eggs. Maybe they're all going off. Maybe they're going bad.
Rotten eggs, yeah.
But that's quite the sight. And good on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good on them. I imagine that smell stayed around for a long time. It was around this time that Thomas was given the nickname of Mr. Creepy around the community. Or Mr. Stinky, after that. Stinky and creepy, probably. Swampy, maybe. Numerous additional complaints regarding his conduct were reported. Thomas was banned from accessing a local swimming pool due to being considered inappropriate. A nearby camera store also declined to process his film due to the content of his photographs. Thomas was actually quite a keen photographer. He would often do paid work as well as a photographer when he was let go from some of his employment. But this particular shop, they saw the pictures he was taking of the children half-dressed. The store did try and report it to the police. The police deemed the pictures didn't have anything untoward going on in them, which I think if there's the sheer amount of the pictures he was taking and then not being his children, but I think it's the police weren't able to kind of prosecute via that. Many other parents recounted instances of their distraught sons who were emotionally affected after being touched in an unusual manner by Mr. Hamilton, who immediately stopped the children from going anywhere near him or his clubs. He started being berated in the streets as he tried to go about his day, which infuriated him.
As a result of news spreading around Stirling regarding the complaints and accusations made against Thomas, his business would go on a long-term decline over the following 19 years. He eventually had to close his business in 1993, and customers at this point started to go to other providers and even his neighbours or like long-term sort of, so even if they wanted a pot of paint, they'd go to Thomas to help him out. Even these people now would start to look elsewhere. Local people would cross the road any time that he would be walking towards them, and some even observed him carrying a pistol in his pocket. His collection of guns and ammunition was gradually stockpiling behind closed doors. As well as this, and despite the numerous concerns that had been raised to this point, Thomas repeatedly tried to start up numerous other boys' sports clubs, and this was around different areas as well. So as you heard, he travelled around different parts of the Highlands, different towns, different villages, trying to then go under the radar and start his own club. And each time, word would travel or reports would be made, and he'd immediately have to shut it down. And that's why I just think how no action has been taken at this point. He's argued that it's just word of mouth. It's just word of mouth. You've got nothing concrete, It's just, it makes me very uncomfortable. Mm. And yeah, anytime that he went on to start a new boys' sports club, so to speak, it would be shut down by concerned parents, the police, or the scouts. 2 former neighbours, James Finney and Scott Edgar, made the following observations about Thomas.
I saw him a few times on the train at Stirling, and he was carrying a gun. He was wearing a jacket that was quite tight, and I could see the handle of the gun sticking out the side of the jacket. He used to say, "Come round and see my guns." I thought he was a right weirdo.
I mean, as a kid, I don't think that would have, as in, the thought that would not appeal. Yeah, not Mr. If Mr. Creepy's asking you to see his guns, don't go.
No. That was the other thing, because other neighbours, because apparently it was a very like easily viewed window to his bedroom, like it was a front-facing window. I don't know which floor it was on, but people would walk past the house and see photos on his wall.
It's like that. I think we've mentioned this numerous times, but in the place where paedophiles would look through in the ballet picture of the young boy, it's like to one person's eye that could be just photography, just artwork or whatever, but when you put that in a malicious, horrible man's hands, it's something a lot more perverse and have a lot more kind of depth to the depravity of it all.
What are his family thinking at this point, Eva? Is he just saying, oh, that's my scout group, they're my children I teach?
Yeah.
Well, why are they not wearing any clothes? Answer, Thomas.
I don't know.
The other Thomas.
Oh.
Sorry.
Been waiting a long time for that.
Found me in the gun as well, by the way. There's no cow in sight.
No, because if I can blow to bits.
Well, you can't really see where I'm shooting, but
There's
there's
steak sandwiches afterwards.
got a little guide.
Which one are you? Oh.
Little guide.
Oh, that's an AK, proper AK-47.
I don't know what it was, but it was literally
It looks
one
like
click.
an AK-47. Yeah, brilliant.
And then the gun nearest is, and my friend's gun. He was there for hours. I had to go out and get a bag of Fanta.
A bag of Fanta?
Yeah, they've put drinks in
Yeah,
bags
bags of
out there
Fanta,
because
yeah.
they get too hot. Lemon. So you might expect at this point, this particular series of events in Thomas's life, it may have caused him to become somewhat of a shutaway, or, you know, if he's getting berated in the streets as well, people not going to his business, you might think he would hide away a little bit from the community that had complained about him. You might think he'd even relocate. But despite his increasingly unsettling behaviours and anger that he was developing towards those that had removed him from the Scouts, Thomas started to go down a far different route. And the different option that he went with was he started writing a series of letters of complaint regarding the rumours against him to many different MPs across the UK. He started gathering public support from the local government ombudsman for Scotland. He also got support from the gun club managers that he had interacted with and gun shop owners that he regularly saw. 2 police officers who approved his gun certificates were also publicly supporting him, as well as local councillors and several parents of other boys who, apparently, his words, he looked after without any complaints. All of these people came to his aid and provided him with a form of character reference, with many of them believing that the allegations against him were unsubstantiated gossip. Thomas even made the decision to write a 2-page letter of complaint to Queen Elizabeth II, and it reads as follows, though we have paraphrased quite a lot of it.
Still long though, isn't it?
Still long, but relevant. It's tricky,
Okay.
'cause it did eat into my page limit, but it's relevant.
No, we've gone over the page limits. Don't worry about that.
So,
Your Majesty, I understand you are a patron of the Scout Association, and, in that capacity, I would like to make you aware of my long-standing complaint against the Scout Association. Over 20 years ago, as a young man of about 20 years of age, after my time as a venture scout, I was asked to become a scout leader, which I did with enthusiasm and in a fair and competent manner. I was at the time, however, somewhat disillusioned with the general management which existed in this district at the time. After a period of a year, I was offered a better position by District Commissioner J. Don. However, my transfer was refused by Scottish Scout headquarters without any explanation. DC Don approached my previous DC, Mr. R. Deschars, and, as a result of this, reported in confidence to me that Mr. R. Deschars was attempting to have me branded as a pervert. When Mr. Don demanded justification of this, Mr. Deschars' only response was that I was friendly with the boys. In what I considered to be a breach of natural justice, Mr. R. Deschars then submitted a confidential report on me in line with the policy organisation and rules of the association. I know that no child has ever made any complaint of a sinister or sexual nature against me, and they visited and interviewed every child in my old group, including especially everyone who had been a member and left. Nothing of a sinister nature came to light. My attempts to approach Scottish Scout headquarters were ignored, and I could get nowhere since I was blocked from all angles. As time passed, numerous and various reports were received that Mr. Tashars was passing information within the District Scout area that I was a pervert, which was passed to the public in an underhand manner. I have been involved with the organisation of boys' sports clubs for over 20 years, and the rumours circulated by officials of the Scout Association have now reached epidemic proportions across the central region. As well as my personal distress and loss of public standing, this situation has also resulted in loss of my business and ability to earn a living. Indeed, I cannot even walk the streets for fear of embarrassing ridicule. All of this and more has been caused by the maladministration of the Scout Association and their denial of natural justice and duty of care. I turn to you as a last resort and am appealing for some kind of intervention in the hope that I might be able to regain my self-esteem in society. I am your obedient servant, Thomas W. Hamilton.
That might not have felt like it. That has been paraphrased by half. And the Queen, you might not be surprised, she never wrote back. Never wrote back.
No.
Probably not the time if I can read it. Jesus. But yes. We arrive at the year of 1996. Thomas was now 43 years old and was described as being round, podgy-faced, heavily balding, and overweight. Yeah, people are not a big fan of him. He had been unemployed for 3 years and was still living out of a small bedroom in the family home. His grandmother, who had performed the role of his mother for at least half of his life, had passed away, and he was still bizarrely embracing the unsettling nickname of Mr. Creepy. On top of this, he had reportedly tried to work his way back into various boys' clubs, including the Scouts and Boy Brigades. He has also tried to start his own independent boys' clubs in many different towns and villages across rural Scotland, all without success due to his reputation. As you heard in his letter to the Queen, he claimed that he could no longer earn a living or even walk the streets for fear of embarrassing ridicule. As a result, a bubbling hatred he had carried within him for many years had now reached boiling point. By this point, no police action could be taken against him, despite his reputation and the backlog of highly concerning complaints made, as the police claimed that they didn't have any sufficient evidence that would stand up in court, other than the testimonies of dozens of young boys. As we mentioned earlier, Thomas had utilised his network of some local MPs, gun club members, gun shop owners, neighbours and parents of other children he, in quotations, looked after, and got them to provide a glowing testimony for him. So in essence, the complaints were brushed off until something more concrete could be found. In a last effort to clear his name, Thomas arranged for the printing of 10,000 leaflets to assert his innocence, which he subsequently distributed by sliding them under the doors throughout the town and surrounding villages.
I can just imagine if they were done badly and just a big picture of him and says not pervert. So you get charged per letter.
Thomas Hamilton leaflet. Let me see if that exists anywhere.
Sure, 10,000 of them have been spread about, but I don't know if it's something you'd hold on to at this point.
Yeah, I can't find it. But yeah, it'd be very interesting to see what you'd write on that if you're trying to prove your innocence.
And not to judge a book by his cover, but he had a very distinctive look, I would say. In the context or in a family where young boys had been complaining about him, I can completely understand this whole Mr. Creepy thing. Stay away from that particular man. Stay away from the man with the photos in his room. Very bizarre.
Yeah. Many of the young boys he had interacted with over the years had previously attended or were still currently attending Dunblane Primary School or Dunblane High School. Thomas had also had several boys' clubs meetings in Dunblane High School during the 1980s, despite many parents' reservations about him being there. And he was even able to continue holding these meetings despite the Central Regional Council trying to shut them down. Perhaps an indication of the amount of sway he still had, despite the growing allegations. On top of this, Thomas had a long-standing bitter exchange with local Labour MP George Robertson, who lived in Dunblane and whose son had attended several of Thomas's clubs before being removed by the family amidst the reports of his inappropriate conduct. It is believed that, in the build-up to the massacre, Thomas had confronted the MP in his own home and potentially with a weapon holstered. On this, MP George Robertson recalled,
"There were lots of little boys that were all stripped to the waist, and Tom Hamilton and his cohorts were all swaggering around. It was like something out of the Hitler Youth. I didn't like what I saw, so I took my son away. My son told me there were some boys he was very familiar with, his favourites who they would call teacher's pet. They would go off on camps with him and seemed to be sworn to secrecy when they got back. After removing my son, I received several angry visits to my home by Tom Hamilton supporters, and even Tom himself."
This is the part that I really struggle with. On top of all the police not taking action at certain points, which I struggle with, it's that he has also, despite, if you heard about an individual that you don't know that well, because none of these people that are supporting him know him intimately, I would say. I don't understand how he's able to gather so much support in the local area and so many people having his back despite all these children. And there are dozens of children that have really bizarre and upsetting and distressing things to say about his camps.
Do you think it's not that long ago, to be fair, but someone in the community who's running these things for young children, seemingly teaching the kids about scouts, teaching them to go away, teaching them how to swim or whatever, it's someone taking their own time to do that. And if you've met him and you think he's a stand-up guy, your children hasn't made the complaint, you think it's just hearsay and you think he's being wrongly accused of it, it's kind of getting the sympathy from it. But I mean, maybe they haven't heard the overwhelming evidence from him, and maybe they view it as, that poor man, he was so good for my son who went there, and my son had a great time, and my son...
I guess if there's only like one or two complaints or something, you can kind of give them, the benefit of the doubt, but it seems to be stacking up.
Yeah. Or is it one of those things where you so want it not to be true? I don't know. It is the point where you're like, how isn't there been anything intervening here happening? I guess, though, by this stage, he's been away from these clubs. Those things and allegations have then prevented him from running those clubs going forward. So he's not actively doing those things at that time anymore. That's kind of been swept under the carpet a little bit.
That's definitely true. And I've just realised something I said earlier, I was surprised he went down the route of not hiding away, not shying away, not becoming a recluse. He's actually doing what you might expect an innocent person to do in trying to fight to clear his name, writing letters to MPs, going to everyone he can to say, look, there are these stories that don't exist. I've written to the Queen, maybe he's behaving like an innocent person would. And that's why people are then to quickly back him.
Yeah, I mean, the leaflets, I got a leaflet the other day saying the best kebab in Cambridge, and now I believe them. So his leaflet saying I'm not a nonce, I'd be like, oh, it mustn't be a nonce if he's giving out leaflets.
Yeah. Wait, have you not tried the kebab yet?
No, I'm a vegetarian. So with an overwhelming hatred in his heart and perhaps not considering the option of relocation... or entering a different world of work, Thomas Hamilton concocted a plan that would change the United Kingdom forever and, in his mind, get revenge on those who he felt had smeared his reputation and ostracised him from a world he once loved. It is here that we move to the timeline of the Dunblane Massacre.
Wednesday, March 13th, 1996, 8:15am. During the early morning, 43-year-old Thomas Hamilton was observed by neighbours scraping ice from the windows of his white van and loading it. He left the engine running so that the vehicle would slowly warm up, and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary for the man in the anorak. The night before, he had mailed almost 20 years of correspondence complaining about how the world was against him to local newspapers and television stations. He then got in the van and left his home on Kent Road in Stirling for what would be the final time. Thomas then drove approximately 5 miles north to Dunblane with clear intentions in his mind. Meanwhile, hundreds of parents had been going about their typical weekday morning routine. They woke their children up, they prepared breakfast for them, they got them dressed in their school uniforms, and they made their way to Dunblane Primary School. It was especially cold that morning, with snow still covering some parts of the town. Some children wanted to stay at home, some children didn't want to leave the warmth of their beds, but for those in Gwen Mayer's Primary 1 class, the day was filled with promise. Their first lesson of the day after assembly was everyone's favourite, PE. They had a fun-filled morning planned for them within the school's gymnasium, and they couldn't wait to get to school to see their friends and to see one of their favourite teachers.
9:30am. An hour and 15 minutes go by, and it is unclear exactly what Thomas Hamilton was doing during this time, as the drive to Dunblane should have only taken around 11 minutes. He arrives on the school grounds and parks his van close to a telegraph pole. He then cut the telephone cables at the base of the pole with a pair of pliers, all of which served as telephone access to many of the houses surrounding the school, but not the school itself. Thomas then armed himself with 743 rounds of ammunition and 4 legally obtained weapons, 2 9mm Browning high-power pistols and 2 M19 357 Smith & Wesson Magnum revolvers. He then put on a pair of earmuffs and slowly made his way to the northwest side of the school, not far from the gymnasium. It is alleged that Thomas fired 2 warning shots into an external female toilet and then into the now empty stage of an assembly hall before forcing his way into the gymnasium. On this particular day, the school had approximately 700 students present, so it is reasonable to believe that Thomas brought with him exactly enough ammunition for each student and teacher. And yeah, there's a story that one of the former children that attended one of his clubs, basically in the days before the massacre, had talked with them and sort of asked questions around what time does school start, what time is the assembly, what time does lessons start. And if he hadn't been if it hadn't taken him an hour and 15 minutes, or, with him de-icing his car, an hour to get there, he would have arrived maybe half an hour earlier, at which point there was 250 children scheduled to have an assembly right by where he was arriving, which many people have said that was his plan. So obviously it's awful what still happens, but the casualty list could have been, if he was, 15 minutes, half an hour earlier, it could have been so much worse. 9:35 a.m. Inside the gymnasium, 28 young pupils between the ages of 5 and 6 and 3 adult members of the school's staff were sitting in the centre of the gym preparing for their PE lesson for Primary 1 class. This image absolutely haunts me for what this would have looked like to everyone else. So they're all sat at the centre of the court, and then this man comes in through the glass doors. Before they could officially start the lesson, a heavily armed Thomas Hamilton appeared before them. As soon as she saw him, PE teacher Eileen Harold went to confront the strange man, but she could only get so close to him. Within seconds, Thomas pulled 2 pistols from his pockets and began firing rapidly and indiscriminately. Eileen was struck by at least one of the bullets and suffered injuries to her arms and her chest as she attempted to cover herself from the weapon. She then crawled into a nearby store cupboard and tried to take as many terrified children with her as possible, some of whom also had serious injuries. Eileen, one of the many heroes of that day, recalled the following.
So we'd just started the warm-up, and that's when it happened. Literally, I would say about 5 minutes into the lesson. I was quite near the door, and he came through the door, a glass door, just banged the door right open. And from the moment he approached the adults first, and he walked towards me and started shooting. My initial reaction was to put my arms up, which is what I did. So that's why I was shot through the arms. From then on in, it was rapid fire shooting and killing instantly. Because after he turned to Gwen, who was sitting at a bench at the back of the gym, and then the other adult, who was a teacher helper, was also shot, and then he targeted the children at very close range afterwards.
The gunfire did not stop, and dozens of bullets together with the smell of gunpowder began to fill the gymnasium, as children and the 2 remaining adults were trying to flee the chaos. 45-year-old Gwen Mayer, the Primary 1 class teacher, was shot and killed immediately as she attempted to guide the children out of harm's way. The final adult, supervisory assistant Mary Blake, was shot in the head and both of her legs, but was miraculously able to survive and crawl into the same storage cupboard, ushering 4 children in there with her as she did so. Some of these children also had gunshot wounds. And in the days that followed, Mary would recall,
I don't suppose yet you have had the opportunity to even come to terms with what happened 2 days ago.
No, I haven't. No, just really with my injuries. But apart from that, that's really... I didn't actually know how many children had died or the other teacher had died. So it's been quite horrendous.
Thomas continued to fire rapidly as he made his way around the gymnasium. He fired 29 additional shots with 1 pistol, killing 1 young child and injuring several others. If his aim had been surer, far more victims would have been claimed. He then made his way up to the east side of the gymnasium, firing 6 shots as he did so, fortunately striking nobody in the process. He then turned around and fired 8 more shots towards the opposite end of the building, once again striking nobody. Heavily frustrated, he then calmly walked to the centre of the gymnasium, where he proceeded to fire 16 bullets, all at point-blank range, into a group of children who were already lying injured and dying on the floor by the earlier gunshots. All of these children were just 5 years old. PE teacher Mrs. Harold recalled the following.
I couldn't move my arms, and I desperately wanted to pull a mat or something over us to protect us. As it was, I can only describe us as being like sitting ducks. The children were at our feet, and one was laying over my legs. I could see bullet wounds in their legs. The children were screaming. The other teacher and I put our fingers to our lips to tell them to be quiet. One boy had been saying over and over what a bad man he was. I was extremely frightened that he might come back to the cupboard and finish us off.
So even that, just the really emphasising the age of the children there, saying, calling him a bad man.
Yeah.
It really kind of underlines it. A primary 7 student walking alongside the western side of the gym building at the specific moment heard a series of loud bangs and screams, sounds that you would never expect to hear at a school in the United Kingdom at this time, prompting him to look inside the gym. Upon doing this, Thomas Hamilton looked up and started shooting towards him, resulting in the pupil being injured by shards of glass that were shattered in the door before he fled the scene. From this location, Thomas discharged an additional 24 rounds in various directions, seemingly without thought. He aimed shots at a window adjacent to the fire exit and the southeast corner of the gym, likely targeting a teacher who was crossing the playground, and subsequently fired 4 additional shots in the same direction after opening the fire exit door and briefly looking out. Thomas then momentarily exited the gym through the fire exit, firing another 4 shots towards the library's cloakroom, which struck and injured Grace Tweddle, a staff member at the school.
Approximately 9:40 a.m. Not far from the fire exit was a mobile classroom, which was used to house a primary 7 class. Within the unit, teacher Catherine Gordon saw Thomas firing shots out of the gymnasium and very quickly instructed her pupils to get on the floor. Thomas quickly spotted her, and within seconds, 9 bullets were peppered into the classroom. Fortunately, bullets only struck books, windows, tables and chairs, including 2 chairs that Miss Gordon's students were sitting on just seconds before she shouted for them to get on the floor. Thomas then went back to the gymnasium, observed the absolute chaos he had created, dropped his pistols and pulled out one of the 2 revolvers he was carrying. He then placed the barrel of the revolver in his mouth, aimed the revolver upwards and fired the 106th shot, bringing an end to his life and an end to the 4 minutes of shooting at Dunblane.
You hear bangs, basically. First of all, you're thinking, is this just somebody dropping something? Is somebody playing around with things? But you couldn't believe at first that it would be somebody shooting. You always had it in the back of your mind that it could be, but it's not the first thing that came to mind. And then just after a couple of minutes of hearing it, we're thinking it's continuing on so long that it's more and more likely that was what it was, gunfire. When we were first shot at through the windows, you could hear obviously the glass, and there was glass all over the floor at that point. That was the main problem. I mean, okay, the bullets had come into the classroom, but there was so much more glass coming towards you. You were thinking, let's try to keep out of the way of it and hide.
Of the 105 bullets he fired towards children and teachers, 16 children and 1 teacher were murdered. 15 of those children were killed at the scene, whilst the final child died when being rushed to hospital. 15 of the children were in primary 1 class, belonging to Mrs. Mayer, who was also murdered. At least an additional 12 children and 3 adults were seriously injured, meaning that only 1 of the 28 children initially inside the gymnasium escaped without injury. The survivors were left to deal with a lifetime of trauma and survivor's guilt.
The victims of the Dunblane Massacre were 5-year-old Abigail Joanne McLennan, 5-year-old Charlotte Louise Dunn, 5-year-old David Charles Kerr, 5-year-old Emily Morton, 5-year-old Emma Elizabeth Crozier, 5-year-old Hannah Louise Scott, 5-year-old Joanna Caroline Ross, 5-year-old John Petrie, 5-year-old Kevin Allen Hassel, 5-year-old Megan Turner, 5-year-old Melissa Helen Curry, 5-year-old Mary Isabel McBeef, 5-year-old Ross William Irvine, 5-year-old Sophie Jane Lockwood North, 5-year-old Victoria Elizabeth Clydesdale, 6-year-old Brett McKinnon, and 45-year-old Gwen Mayer. All of these lives taken because someone had become so alienated and filled with hate against the world that he believed had wronged him, And they are at the beginning of their journeys in this world. And yeah, it's never easy to talk about. I remember when we did the Sandy Hook episode, it was particularly difficult to talk about these people. They all had families, they all had parents. The particular one I recall as well is Sophie Jane Lockwood North had just a year or 2 years prior lost her mother to cancer. So the dad was alone, and his promise to his wife when she passed away was that I'll always look after Sophie. And I think there was another child that had a rash develop that morning and didn't really want to go to school, but went to school anyway. So the impact this had not only on the community, the country, the whole United Kingdom, but the families and every citizen within the UK absolutely traumatized by these events, and they're still recovering.
Yeah, and as we've said obviously. I mean, the sad thing is, we've covered a lot of school shooting cases before, and this is a place where you expect your children to be safe. It's a place for them to be nurtured and develop into young adults, and yeah, it being a place where they've gone and the most evil person is there, and it's like, as well, it's a life full of what ifs, isn't it? I mean, just even thinking of the child who told Thomas Hamilton about the day and about the assembly and about things like that. That to him, that was an innocent question and with an innocent answer, and I'm sure that person carried a lot of guilt with them afterwards as well. And as you said, Ben, like, it's a lot of what ifs. It's like, oh, maybe I nearly didn't send the kids there, and what if I did this, and what if I did that? When they're not to blame. There's just evil people in the world, isn't there? And it's just harrowing. Yeah, when you picture, we all know people with children or have children of our own or whatever, and that age, when they just starting to blossom into their own little personalities, it's just truly heartbreaking.
Yeah, I've not been able to shake that image of a man with head muffs, headphones on, breaking into the gymnasium, and just all of them just kind of looking like, who's this person? What's he doing? Nobody on earth should go through what these families went through.
9:41 a.m. Then headmaster of Dunblane Primary, Mr. Ronald Taylor, made the first documented call to emergency services after being alerted by assistant headmistress Agnes Alston to the possibility of a gunman on the school premises. Agnes had informed Ronald that she heard screaming inside the gymnasium and seen what she had thought to be spent cartridges on the ground. As well as this, Ronald claimed to have been aware of loud noises, which he assumed to have been from builders on site that he had not been informed of. Whilst on his way to inspect the noises, the shooting ended, and when he saw the gunman deceased on the ground, he ran back to his office and told Deputy Headmistress Fiona Edington to immediately call for ambulances, which was made 2 minutes later at 9:43 a.m. 9:57 a.m. The first ambulance reached Dunblane and tended to the wounded. A subsequent medical team from Dunblane Health Centre arrived 7 minutes later at 10:04 a.m. This team included local doctors and a nurse who participated in the early resuscitation efforts for the injured children. Shortly thereafter, medical teams from the health centres in the neighbouring towns of Doon and Callander also arrived. 11:10 a.m. By this point, an hour and a half after the school shooting had ended, all injured individuals had been transported to Stirling Royal Infirmary for treatment. As we mentioned, one child sadly died whilst being transported. Following their assessment, several children were transferred for urgent and intensive care to Falkirk and District Royal Infirmary, while others were sent to the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Glasgow.
Friday, March 15th, 1996. 2 days after the shooting, a vigil and prayer gathering took place at Dunblane Cathedral, which drew attendees from various faiths and religious backgrounds. Meanwhile, anger and confusion spilled out across the country after public knowledge of Thomas Hamilton's past behaviours started to be shared all over the country. His mother, Agnes, only ever made very limited comments about the shooting. She stated the following: "He seemed to get on with everyone I know of. I know he had pictures of boys when they went out camping and things like that, but I never thought he was capable of anything like this." His biological father, Thomas Watt Sr., who abandoned Thomas when he was 18 months old, meanwhile made the following comments, and was sure not to include Watt in his son's name. "I didn't want to know. I had my new family to think about. People who knew me know I'm a good man. I don't want to be associated with Thomas Hamilton in any way. I need counselling."
Sunday, March 17th, 1996, and this was also Mother's Day. The morning service at Dunblane Cathedral, led by Reverend Colin McIntosh, was transmitted live by the BBC. This memorial service was attended by Queen Elizabeth II and her daughter Anne, Princess Royal. The Reverend proved to be a tower of strength to almost all of the residents of Dunblane in the days, weeks and months, and even the years that followed the Dunblane Massacre, providing counsel to families, leading an emotional memorial service, and taking the funerals for many of the 16 school children who died in the massacre. Yeah, I found loads of articles basically when this Reverend eventually retired, saying that he kept that community going because so many people were completely shattered by what had happened. He was a pillar of strength to everyone. A later remembrance ceremony was held in which Prince Charles and more than 600 other people attended. And 2 days after this, Thomas Hamilton's body was cremated at a private service that was, quote, far away from Dunblane. On April the 11th, 1996, 29 days after the Dunblane primary school shooting, the gymnasium at the school was demolished and a memorial garden was laid in its place. 2 years after this, a special memoriam garden was created at Dunblane Cemetery, where Gwen Mayer and 12 of the 16 children killed were buried. A Dunblane commemoration standing stone was also installed in the local cathedral. So that was the timeline of events for the Dunblane Massacre. We're now going to move on to a little bit of aftermath.
The Cullen inquiry into the massacre recommended that the government implement stricter regulations on handgun ownership in the United Kingdom and evaluate the potential benefits of an outright ban on private ownership, while allowing for club ownership to continue. Additionally, the report recommended enhancements to school security and the vetting process for individuals working with children under the age of 18. The Home Affairs Select Committee agreed on the need for restrictions on gun ownership but deemed a complete ban on handguns as inappropriate. Evidence of numerous prior police encounters with Thomas Hamilton was submitted to the Cullen inquiry but subsequently sealed under a closure order, bizarrely restricting the publication of it for 100 years. You never can ever understand why people are like, oh, that's fair enough. The police don't want us to see this thing for 100 years. It must be absolutely legit.
Yeah, there's a lot of different opinions over this 100-year sealing. They're saying it's obviously to protect the identities, isn't it? But I think it's to possibly cover up for a few mistakes.
We'll just redact the names.
That's the argument, isn't it? But there's only parts of it that have come out, and it's very safe parts for them to disclose.
The only thing is to protect identities, then.
Yeah, it's strange. It's very strange.
Redact. The stated reasoning for sealing these documents was to, as Ben said, safeguard the identities of minors. However, this decision sparked national allegations of a cover-up aimed at preserving the reputations of certain officials who had let Thomas off and even publicly supported him. After the Lord Advocate Colin Boyd reviewed the closure order, edited versions of some documents were made public in October 2005. Nevertheless, 4 files containing post-mortem examinations, medical records and profiles of the victims, along with Thomas Hamilton's own post-mortem, remained sealed for the 100 years to prevent causing distress to the victims' families and survivors.
It's also apparently the individuals that renewed his gun license despite a lot of heavy allegations being present, and also you could argue in the news of learning the true story behind his mother, he was in a potential mental health crisis, or very much going through some mental health issues there as well, which they've covered that identity up, which I think is, again, redacted though. I don't know. It's very bizarre.
The documents that were released indicated that in 1991, complaints against Thomas Hamilton were lodged with the Central Scotland Police and were examined by the Child Protection Unit. He was referred to the Procurator Fiscal for consideration of 10 charges, which included assault, obstructing police officers, and violations of the Children and Young Persons Act 1937. Reports from active police personnel indicated that he was unfit to possess firearms. However, no action was taken in response.
This is the only thing I can assume, because I assumed as well he was very maybe influenced by what happened at Hungerford a few years prior. There weren't any as far as I could see, obviously Columbine wouldn't happen for another 3 years, because he's mailed a form of manifesto. He's stockpiled a huge amount of ammunition. He's obviously made this plan, but it's very we'll talk about it more shortly, there weren't too many things like this happening around the United Kingdom at the time. And I just think this 100-year gagging order or sealing of certain documents is protecting the people that could have stopped him. And that seems to be a thing that we talk about in a lot of the mass shootings or the school shootings. There are always signs that were spotted, but unfortunately, you know, I don't want to say missed, because we've had people before that work in the police talk about, you know, the amount of different people that they're watching at certain times, and the amount that can slip through the net, or they can make the, you know, improper arrests or get the wrong people. But it's, yeah, in this case in particular, it's infuriating because he was very much on their radar.
Yeah, you feel like you can understand if the person's just a bit of a loner and there's nothing else that they've done to, and, you know, people said he's a bit strange, and you think, oh, how did the police miss that? You can kind of understand if there's not anything outline. Where there's been accusations of child abuse, there's been numerous times where he's threatened people with his gun, and he's been acting strangely at the gun range. You feel there's more than enough times where, you know, questions have to be asked. At least, you know, if he's been deemed unfit to possess a firearm. Mm-hmm. No action was taken in response. That's when you start going, okay, you know, you can't. You just go, oh, you know, the police made a simple mistake. It's obviously, you know, it has to be looked at.
In the wake of the shootings, a small organisation called the Gun Control Network was established, and this particular organisation received support from a majority of the parents of the victims from both the Dunblane and Hungerford massacres. Bereaved families and their supporters also launched a campaign to prohibit private gun ownership, and this was referred to or named the Snowdrop petition, which was named for the snowdrop flowers that bloom, or the only flower that blooms in March in Scotland. The petition garnered 705,000 signatures and received backing from various newspapers, including the Sunday Mail. The Scottish publication had previously initiated its own petition to ban handguns, which collected 428,279 signatures within 5 weeks following the Dunblane Massacre. In the weeks that followed, 160,000 guns were handed over to the police in the UK. We were looking at this, weren't we, for a potential kind of a thumbnail for this episode, and there are the newspaper headlines of this tragedy, massacre, shooting, are terrifying and absolutely heartbreaking. In the light of the public fury regarding the massacre, the then Conservative government led by John Major enacted the Firearms Amendment Act of 1997, which prohibited all cartridge ammunition handguns with the exception of the .22 caliber single-shot firearm. And this was done all across England, Scotland and Wales. After the 1997 general election, the new Labour government under Tony Blair passed the Firearms Amendment No. 2 Act of 1997, which extended or increased the ban to include the remaining .22 cartridge handguns in these regions. Basically, it left only, and we're not gun people, but muzzle loading and historical handguns, as well as certain types of sporting firearms that were used in competition that did not meet the Home Office's definition of handgun due to their size. This legislation does not apply to Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man or the Channel Islands, and remains present to date. And there's been a lot of different opinions on this. Obviously, it's to an extent done what it was supposed to do. If you look at the numbers of mass or spree shootings in the UK, certainly compared to some other countries. Nigel Farage once controversially described these measures as knee-jerk and called for them to be immediately scrapped.
Can't fail but disappoint you, can you? No, Nigel Farage.
Farage.
Scrapes the barrel, then goes lower and lower and lower. Former tennis star Andy Murray grew up in Dunblane, and he and his brother were present on the morning of the massacre, taking cover in adjacent classrooms. Though he has been generally reluctant to speak about his experiences, and being such a young age at the time, he has mentioned in his autobiography, Hitting Back, that his mother used to give Thomas Hamilton lifts in the car, and that he and his brother used to attend youth groups run by him.
Looking back on that, how impressed, proud are you of how your town has recovered from that?
Yeah, well, it's been, they recovered unbelievably well from it. I mean, it's not something that, you know, anyone would ever want to go through, but it's something that, you know, obviously when I go back there, you know, for me personally, it's been nice to do something. You know, I'm very proud of where I come from and where I've grown up.
Judy Murray said about this, and his class were actually on the way to the gym. His class were the next ones in the gym. His class was stopped when somebody went up when they heard the noises and discovered what had happened. I was one of the hundreds of mums that were queuing up at the school gates waiting to find out what had happened, not knowing if your children were alive or not. I actually don't go near that part of the building. When I go up to the school now, if I'm doing something, I'll do it in the playground or I just do it in the new gym. In the aftermath of the shooting, Judy said Andy and Jamie just wanted to know why Hamilton had done what he did. And Andy's saying with him winning accolades, he hopes to kind of bring some pride back to Dunblane and maybe, when people think of Dunblane and think of maybe happier times. But yeah, it's a horrifying event, and you can still see like if he gets mentioned in interviews, he's very emotional and very he doesn't want to talk about it, which you can completely understand.
So Dunblane is currently the most deadly mass shooting in British history, with 17 killed and at least an additional 15 injured. The different definitions vary all over the world, but a lot of the leading news media organisations define a mass shooting as any incident in which 4 or more people are shot, and that is regardless of whether they're injured or killed. So since 1734, 291 years ago, using their definition, how many mass shootings do you think have occurred in the United Kingdom? We've covered 4 of like the top 5 most deadly ones.
So nearly 300 years before the gun laws were in place. I'm going to go 350.
Okay.
Let's say 250.
By using their definition, there have been 115 in that 291 year process. It included, for example, the White House farm murders.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of other familicides in there as well. But the majority of them, the vast majority, were less than 5 people. Then in looking, because I was thinking with the manifesto, with it being a school shooting, I was thinking what other things, were there any other major events in the UK that might have inspired his decision to make these plans? And obviously the key one that keeps coming up is Hungerford. But in trying to find stats and information about this, I found this website which absolutely I was lost for words a little bit. So there's a website which is masshootingtracker.site, which I'll pop all of these links, and I've got loads more documents. And it basically is a tracker for mass shootings. It's based in the US, but I mean, at the time, I'll open it now. I don't know what the detail, but when I first looked at it, it was. So in 2025 so far, we're recording on the 14th of March. 62 mass shootings have happened so far this year. And it's been 2 days since the last mass shooting. When I opened it, when I added that link into the document, it was 0 days since the last mass shooting. But it's an incident. I mean, there have been recent ones as well. I mean, of the higher fatality list, there's one that happened in 2021 in the UK, in Plymouth. It's something that just doesn't seem to have, despite the law changes, have completely stopped.
That's the thing you always look at, and you think, obviously with Australia as well, like they got that the gun crime has gone right down since Port Arthur massacre, and it's so easy to say, obviously, in like with the amount of guns there are out there in America, but it's just like taking a firmer stance on things, how things can be affected. But yeah, it's a heartbreaking case, and it's definitely, that's then led to huge changes within the legal system over here, and it's led to a lot safer place. Then we'll get loads of comments from people saying about knife crime over here. So
yeah, that seems to be the response. But yeah, I mean, for those of you that haven't, we've had loads of people join our Facebook group recently, so big thank you there. With every episode, we put all of our kind of references and different interesting articles or links into the group. For this one, I've got the public inquiry documents. I've got the ones that have been redacted and released from that 100-year suppression, and also some statements from Parliament, which are made by the MPs that Thomas Hamilton had interacted with, so they're fascinating to read through. So I'll pop all of those links and the masshootingtracker.site into the Facebook group.
And yes, guys, as we started doing at the end of the episode, it's a bit of light, maybe not light relief, spooky relief, if that is such a thing. It is time for Spooky Corner.
Welcome to Spooky Corner. Spooky Corner.
So this is where we ask you guys to send in a story over to us over at hello@icmap.co.uk with the subject spooky stories, and you tell us a little something that happened to you or someone you know, or maybe it's a mystery, something you can't explain, or something that just creeps you out. And this is exactly what Rachel Wade has done. She has sent in a story, so let's see what spookiness happened along with Rachel.
Go on, Rachel. It's quite threatening, actually, sorry. Go on, Rachel.
Hiya, I've always been a skeptic, but every time I'm reminded of this, it always makes me doubt myself. I grew up in the seaside town of Lowestoft, and during college, my friends and I got very into paranormal and abandoned buildings. We'd explore an old machinery factory, brackets never got caught, the abandoned hospital, brackets almost got caught, and an old ice cream factory absolutely got caught. An ice cream factory would be interesting. We also would go to random spots in town to do Ouija boards. My parents own a metaphysical shop in Lowestoft, so all things witchy and paranormal are second nature to me.
Oh, it's on the Market Square in Cambridge. The Science of Magic. It's also referred to as a rock shop. If you're into crystals, probably calling it a rock shop. Is that okay? I'm straight thinking
I managed to convince my parents to let me have one of the Ouija boards that they had in stock. Now, I never really believed the Ouija boards actually worked, considering they were created by Hasbro, but it was always fun to try them anyway. My friends and I would go to the woods in the middle of town in the night, or each other's houses, and barely ever get any actual information or proof from the board. You guys never done Ouija boards, have you?
Never done it. I was just thinking surely one person could sort of mess up your result by just pushing a bit harder,
That's what she said. One time we decided to try the Ouija board on the seafront. We spoke to someone claiming to be a soldier from the war trapped on the beach. He seemed real enough, saying things I know my friends wouldn't know or think to make up, and really spooked us all. Sadly, Rachel doesn't go into detail what the actual soldier told them there, but a couple years later, now living in Cambridge, I decided to Google any ghostly sightings in Lowestoft. The number one most seen ghost, according to the website I was on, was a soldier stood looking out to the sea in the exact spot we used the Ouija board. I know none of my friends knew about this, and I certainly didn't. So either it's a really big coincidence, or we actually spoke to a soldier. Ever since then, I've always wondered. I have video proof of my friend getting grabbed by the leg during one session, another of something being thrown, and plenty of odd sightings and apparitions that my friends and I can't explain. But this story of the soldier is the one that makes me doubt my skepticism. I mean, your friend getting the leg grabbed and something being thrown would make me go like...
Yeah.
And it's the one time we didn't record anything. Oh! Always the case.
Of course.
Always a bloody well case. Thank you for potentially reading my story, and more than anything, keep doing what you're doing. Thanks, Rachel, or as you once called me on Instagram, Regina.
Oh.
That's
not even like an autocorrect that we can blame.
It's not even close. But yes, guys, we've just had another spooky story come in with a video.
Oh, just this second.
Yes.
Well, that's spooky.
But yes, guys, if you have a spooky story, do let us know. We'd love to hear it. Just email us at hello@icmap.co.uk with spooky stories in the title. And if you guys write it out as a story or even have, a gripping intro, that is always good. But we love to hear from you guys. And thank you so much for submitting your stories. We are getting a lot in at the moment, and we very much appreciate it. And we love hearing from you.
So there you have it. That was the case of the Dunblane Massacre. Yeah, just an absolutely all-round heartbreaking and blood-boiling case, which is always a difficult combination. But we will be back next week with episode 8 of the series. We are cruising through series 11 at the moment. If you just cannot wait until next week's episode, which I will give the cryptic clue on shortly, we are still releasing weekly bonus content over on our website, icmap.co.uk, which you can access via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just on the website itself. And as well as getting all the bonus content, there are different tiers. You can get early access to ad-free main channel episodes, monthly live streams, access to our wonderful, wonderful Discord, and so much more, discount on merchandise and things like that. And we also do case requests over there. So if you are interested, why not head over to icmap.co.uk or click any of the padlocks you can see in your eyes.
In your eyes.
Oh dear.
See, why don't click a padlock you can see?
In your eyes.
But anyways, fucking hell.
Got to a clue.
Oh yeah, sorry.
It might not be back next series. All right, hit it.
Benjamin Carter's cryptic clues. Everyone gather round for some clues that can be quite cryptic, but he's going to give them to you anyway. Hope you can figure them out.
Shit clue time.
Shit clue time. Shit clue time. Gather round now. It's the clue time. Whoa. Next week's episode. Wow. This is one that I think a lot of people are going to be intrigued by. Not the clue, the case. But maybe the clue as well. Ooh, that former Aston Villa striker is very small. Oh, that former Aston Villa striker is very small.
Football.
There you go, guys. It's not a bad one from Ben. I think any football fans will probably will get it. But yes. We'll be back again, guys, with a brand new case next week. Thank you so much for all your support. It's much appreciated. Don't forget to give us a sub or a follow if you aren't doing so already. It helps us more than you'll ever know. And we'll be back again next week. But until then, like we always say,
we say this all the time.
Truce Dan's yawning. Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, unless it's pretty much anything that this man did. I mean, don't give people nicknames of TV shows before the TV show has come out, because that doesn't line up. It's very bizarre. Spock.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I thought Mr. Creepy. Or maybe if you're a place that does printing in an industrial capacity, and like maybe don't help a campaign for a nonce.
Yeah. I'm really surprised we couldn't find one of those pamphlets from back in the day, just to see what he was trying to say.
Ben, could you design, just for my own amusement, could you design your own pamphlet if people were calling you a nonce?
Got a pen and paper ready, but you added me. No need.
No need. Okay, I'd love to see it. But anyway, thank you guys for joining us, guys. Until next time, take care of yourselves.
See you later.